Okay, well, good afternoon. I'm Michael Ginsberg, Dean Emeritus at Worcester Polytechnic Institute and Principal Consultant with Optimal Campus Consulting. Um, and, and Google has just decided that I was asking it a question. So welcome to our, I think Tom just said it's our 8th virtual meetup. And the topic today is prioritizing the right IT with a reduced budget. I think our assumption in setting this up is that IT is being asked to do more with information technology at universities and colleges now than ever before, and probably we have fewer resources to do that with. So to start, I'm going to ask Tom to put up a poll to try to verify half of the assumption, and that is, are budgets really down from what they were in previous years? So Tom, if you would do that, and then I think that you probably have a few administrative items you'd like to discuss.
Certainly, yeah. Just a few items to get out of the way. Our normal sort of format for these discussions is we leave everyone on mute, and then as we start the conversation, we can bring folks in through chat or through raising your hand. However, since this is our 8th, as I believe it's our 8th virtual meetup, I think at some point we can just unmute everyone and they can unmute and mute themselves as you feel comfortable. So we're going for a rather laid back roundtable discussion. If you have something you'd like to discuss, feel free to bring it up. So, and at the end of the meetup, I will also be sending out a questionnaire specifically for this event and any other materials that we may share during the meetup. So there you go. That should be just about it.
Okay. Well, we have
10 more seconds on the poll.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Done. Can everybody see that? Or do I have to press share results?
There we go. Share.
You shared results. Okay, so we are, I guess our assumption is more or less confirmed that 50% of you have said that you have less budget. Only one person says more budget. So we will, it's not a really rich year for sure. So the question becomes, how are you prioritizing? What are you doing? I'm still assuming that the demands are more than are easily met. Who would like to comment on that? Tom, you want to unmute everybody?
Yeah,
please?
I think we're at a point where we can just do that. So anyone should be able to unmute themselves at this point. Let me see. Ask all to unmute. There we go.
Good. Okay, I'll be the professor and I'll call on somebody. Steve, would you care to talk about what's going on in your world?
So a couple things. Our budget's pretty much actually 8 minutes ago we were finishing up our budget planning, our first budget planning call for FY22, which for us is July 1. I'm sure most of you is July 1. It's going to be level next year. Some of the things we've done is we've actually accelerated some of the projects that we had planned to do next summer and actually did them over winter break. We actually achieved some saving. We renovated, I believe, 9 or 10 classrooms. You gutted to the ceiling, ripped up the floor, new furniture, AV technology. And one of the reasons we did that was, or two of the reasons we did that. One, we had a longer break because we started our fall semester in August, so students left prior to Thanksgiving. So we had a 2.5-month period, and we actually achieved some savings on the labor side because the trades, electricians and our AV folks were highly available and very eager to work. So that was one thing that we did. The other thing that we've done in the past couple years, and it's something that I've talked to some people about, is we licensed a product called LabStats. If you've never heard of LabStats, it's this little company out in, I think they're in Idaho. We really didn't have any sense as to how all of our fleet of computers, both labs, classrooms, offices, students that are computers that are used by work study students were actually used. We didn't want to spy on them, but we wanted to see, the hours they were used, what software was being used. And because of that, we were able to eliminate 2 labs, because as much as people wanted to say the lab was important, the fact that over a year-long period, 2 semesters, the lab was barely used. And so we probably achieved we've probably eliminated 200 computers from our fleet in the past 6 months, simply by getting rid of every computer that that we weren't using, especially the older ones. So the real savings is not having to replace. It's like the best $3,000 I spend a year. So if those are 2 concrete things that we've done. We've also looked very hard at all of our licensing, and I'm sure everybody does that on a regular basis, just to make sure that we're not spending money that we shouldn't be spending.
Thanks, Steve. Mike, you said in the chat that we missed the option of way less budget. You want to talk about that?
So I'm in Alberta, and so we're in the midst of a fairly desperate budget situation for the equivalent of a state province here. We're looking at, for the province, budget deficit this year that'll turn to be about $21 or $22 billion. So within that, education, healthcare, or crime targets, we're seeing probably we've been very well funded. So I'm due very little actually sympathy. So we've been funded probably 60% publicly and 40% from other grants and revenues. We do not have much in the way of endowments, though, so it's a bit of a different prospect for us. But even with that lack of sympathy that I would ask for, we're seeing probably a 20-25% reduction in that 60% funding from the provincial grants. So it's a pretty major change for us institutionally, not just IT. We'll see staff reductions here this year of about 400 people across the university, and then probably another 400 people next year as well. So for us, the situation is not just what can I or can I not spend on infrastructure, but it's also, okay, and how do I retool the organization and find out what we're not going to do and how we're not going to do it.
Mike, you said you're in Alberta. Which university?
University of Alberta in Edmonton.
In Edmonton, okay. Christine, you also said that you would have selected the way less budget option. You want to tell us a little bit about if everybody would tell us where you are when you talk, that'd be helpful.
Hi, I'm Christine from Ohio Dominican University in Columbus, Ohio. Like Mike, we have some pretty severe economic financial challenges. We had these before COVID, and it's just worse now. I've lost 30% of my IT staff in the past 6 months. And we were, in my opinion, understaffed to begin with. So we're doing similar things. We've been able to use some of the CARES Act money, but my equipment budget's been slashed, not able to keep up with the replacement life cycle and some of those things. So for us, fortunately, we have a leadership team who understands that these cuts have impacted everyone across the board. And so their expectations are in line with that. They're not expecting the sun and the moon and the stars with nothing. So we've been trying to use some of the CARES Act money, financial aid work study folks, and we get there's also some funding coming from the state of Ohio through an organization to help increase some bandwidth across colleges. So we're doing that. We did many of the same things folks have already mentioned, tried to eliminate things that didn't need to be there, reviewing contracts and licenses, which we've done in the years prior to this as well. So it's looking pretty grim, but we're doing a really good job of keeping our heads above water. In terms of providing services, we had one of the smoothest starts this semester than we've ever had.
Very good.
What's the size of your staff? Just curious.
Right now it's 7, including me.
Wow.
Yeah, we have one network administrator who's the administrator basically of everything. And so if he gets sick or goes on vacation, we're doomed pretty much. Yeah. I mean, we've done a lot of cross training to try to prevent some of that, but there are just things, so we can't really do any new infrastructure initiatives. We are just keeping the business running at this point.
And Christine, you service both academic computing and administrative computing?
Correct.
Okay. Telecommunications also?
Yes. Yes. So I have one person who is the LMS administrator, the telecom administrator, the AV support person, the video streaming expert, and editor.
All depends upon which day?
Well, sometimes all of those in one day.
Same day, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, who else would like to talk about what they're doing in their area?
I can, if you don't mind, just to, well, I guess put things in
James,
perspective. Yeah.
Please.
So welcome, everybody. My name is James Stoffel. I'm Director of Technology at Joe Boston Institute, located in Jamaica Plains. It's a small campus. It's only about 40 acres. Predominantly, we are entertaining students from Tokyo area. So we're an ESL college. So the uniqueness of our college kind of also puts us in perspective that when a crisis hits like this, AKA COVID, that it changes the dynamics of how the colleges actually run. So predominantly you would have anywhere from every semester, up to 200 students staying on campus, but unfortunately due to other countries worrying about their students as well as the families worrying about their children, needless to say, our students are all still in Tokyo and we're doing 100% online classes. What that does is it changes the dynamics of where the money of my budget goes. So just like you, Christine, my hardware is slashed. And I think I'll be lucky if I think I can see any of it pop back into my 2022 budget. So, because obviously there'll be some people saying, well, if you didn't need any new equipment now, are you going to need new equipment then? So you always have to deal with all that. But what was interesting is that what I had to do is, with the reduced budget, I had to explain to the business manager and the president that some monies just couldn't be slashed because of the renewals, your software renewals. So my budget, it probably got reduced just in the renewals alone for software was, I don't know, 60, 70,000. And that just had to stay in there. Just couldn't cut that back. But other things that we ended up trying to do, any printer cartridges, all of that, since a lot of students weren't going to be here, some of the money redirected from those purchases, we went into seeing if we could redirect it towards increasing our bandwidth because we have our LMS on site. We don't do it cloud. So we ended up increasing that. And then what we tried to do is rent out the classrooms to try to generate some revenue to try to offset the operational costs of the electric and stuff like that. But the trickiest part is when people don't understand the technology and what is the necessity of it. So unfortunately, at the same time that we need to increase our bandwidth because we're going to have 200 plus students online, as well as not to mention the 50 staff accessing the LMS, you still had individuals on campus that still had to run it. So your finance department was still there, your administration office was still there. The firewall, unfortunately, wasn't up to snuff. So then that required to be upgraded in order to anticipate the jump on that. And that was interesting. That was probably a back and forth trying to explain that to non-technical people, why in a budget crunch and when you have to cut money down, when they don't see it working, they don't understand how it works. And that was probably took a week's worth of just kind of back and forth trying to explain it to non-technical people what the necessities are and trying to find the correct layman terms so I could spend, $15,000-$20,000 on a new firewall with the supporting hardware, the fiber switches and all that bunch of stuff. So it was just very interesting. Needless to say, half the people still, I don't think, understand how the technology works. They're just happy that the students are able to log into the LMS. Everything is working. They don't realize that, oh, and then I had other business people saying, well, we're going to reduce our electricity. So in that server closet, what can we shut down? Okay, well, we can't
Jesus
shut
Christ.
anything down there. So yeah, so there was some interesting things there. So the only thing I actually shut down was, I think, my paper cut server, and that was a VM because there's no students on site. But they're like, oh, well, what about, all this hardware? They walked in there like, why can't we turn that off? Like, no, you don't understand. You can't log into the network if these are off. So it was really, really interesting. And these aren't just one-time conversations. I mean, I've been there for 10 years and it's just, I have this conversation, it seems like every 2-3 years. I don't know if anybody else deals with that, but I think that was the hardest part of a budgetary crisis, trying to, and not in layman's terms, try to explain why I need to keep certain funds in my account so that we can run the college. And even then it's still, I mean, I'm just like you, Christine. We're one of 2 for our college, and I'm one of 2, and the second person's furloughed. So it's just, it's tough. So needless to say, you have to still deal with logins. You still have to deal with security, log readings, backups, and all that. And how do you do that? It's very different, very, very difficult. And they don't get that because they don't see it. I don't know if anybody else has that part of the difficult of trying to sustain your department budget when people don't understand the complexity of what you do. So,
Thanks, Jake. Troy, I think you said you can't turn your camera on, but you can talk.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Troy McFarlane. I'm with the University of Ottawa in Ontario, Canada. So I'll take a slightly different spin. So the angle that I'm looking at is in relation to the IT budget, looking at the governance process, interfacing with the individual faculties that I'm assuming it's a similar state in the other institutions, is that each faculty has their own spending authority. So what we're working on is the idea of reducing duplication, investing in the concepts of reference architectures, business capability planning, so that we can focus on the budget requests and then try to reduce the budget spend by reducing duplication and trying to increase the level of communication between the individual faculties that also have the ability to have their individual IT teams, and trying to take more of an emphasis on the central approach and looking at it from an enterprise perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry, you turned your camera on, so I'm guessing you have something you'd like to contribute.
Well, I just didn't want you all to see me eat my lunch, actually. So
Okay.
I didn't think, it goes back to that school thing. If you don't have enough to share with everybody, didn't bring it to class. So,
Right.
But that's done now. So that's why you get the joy of seeing me. So that was.
Where are you?
I am at Campbell University. We are located in North Carolina, the eastern side of North Carolina. We have 3 different campuses, one in Raleigh, one and then 2 in Bowie's Creek, which is about a half an hour south of Raleigh. So it's been an interesting time for me since we've been doing a mix of different kinds of instruction over the past year. And on top of that, we got a new CFO. And one of the things that she wanted us to do was to take over all of the software and hardware budget lines, which had been distributed prior to my arrival 3 years ago. So big effort is to just figure out, rationalizing our software lines, figuring out what people are using, what duplicates do we have. And I'm assuming that many of you have already done that. Consolidating licenses, since before it was very much a decentralized environment in terms of this was my pot of money and I could do whatever I wanted with it. And so while our budget has technically increased, it hasn't. We've just taken over the responsibility now for a lot more than we had before. So.
Yeah, Michael, an interesting question to ask right here. We've heard from a number of different folks. Might well be, what kind of questions do individuals have that they might pose to the group from the perspective of what they are experiencing?
Did you have one, Elmore?
I didn't have one.
Milos.
Hi, Milos, Grand Valley State University in Allendale, Michigan. We have multiple locations as well. My answer was budget is the same, and I got lucky. I just got here 5 months ago. The new president, who came in a year before me, decided to keep enrollment, management, and IT intact because she was hiring 2 new VPs, me and a colleague of mine who came from Pennsylvania. What I would ask is, and so our budget has stayed the same, overall severely underfunded and understaffed for the scale and the number of people we support and the needs of everyone. But what I would ask, just based on some of the comments that colleagues have shared earlier, is are you actually having any serious strategic conversations as to why this is happening? I'm just tired of people and so-called leaders or those in leadership positions using pandemic as the excuse. Some of you have mentioned that universities have had these challenges in the past. So why wasn't this addressed? Why didn't we work on improving our product, right? And the services we provide? Because at some point, market demand, it's capitalism, right? It's market demand, the market supply. People, you want your product or they don't. And if they don't, you have a problem. And it's not their fault. You're producing a product. If there's a better competition, if there's a better option, I say this all the time. To me, is extremely embarrassing for so many students to invest 6 years of their lives, in some cases 7, to get a 4-year degree. That should not be acceptable. That is not acceptable in any other industry. Why is it that we're not having the right conversations? Because you will never get, at some point you get to the bone, right? You can start cutting off limbs too. But at some point you get to the point where there's nothing left to cut, right? All the fat is trimmed, the muscles and everything else, and we dispose with the limb too. Then what? I think we need to have, as an industry, and I'm really surprised to hear that all of this is happening to our Canadian friends as well and neighbors. We need to have some, serious conversations, look each other in the eyes and realize that we can do better than what we're doing now. Just walking into a place, they are so fortunate, or I'm fortunate that I'm not, gentleman's name escapes me right now, but the person that was talking about people walking into the data center and saying, why can't we turn that off and that off, they would have not liked my response, right? And I probably wouldn't have lasted that long anyway. But at some point, where's the strategy? Where's the leadership? Where's the innovation? Where's the reimagining the way we do education in this country or on this continent in the year we live in? I think we have a lot of work to do there, because no matter what you do, if there's not enough demand for your product when it comes to pricing or the quality of the modalities or so forth, you can keep cutting until you lock the front door.
So Milos, are you focused just on IT, or are you saying this is an issue across all campus, all functions?
I think this is an issue of higher education in North America. There are I'm very familiar with some of the European models as well. I have not been living in Europe for the last 20 plus years, even though I visit frequently. So I will not claim to have expertise there. But in North American, in American higher ed, I've worked at 3 different universities over the last 20 plus years. This is not new. My previous university was a smaller private university, about 3,600 students. We're now at over 24,000 students where I am now. And we had these issues in the past. We had these issues before the pandemic where we had to cut and do furloughs and layoffs and restructuring and merging and closing that building and not using that and so forth. And then pandemic came, and then all of a sudden that became almost like a cover for maybe some of the mismanagement in decades prior, or lack of courage to maybe take some groups of people across campus on and say there is a better way. And then second thing is, I get the CARES funding that's coming, or that came already, and it's coming. It's all great and it's all helpful, but that is not a strategy. Handout is not a business strategy. Sitting around waiting for somebody to bail you out is not a business strategy. And everybody who's in an executive role, if that is the business strategy that they're counting on, they should not be occupying those seats any longer. It's on you to lead this university towards greener pastures. How do you do that? And if you're unable to do that, you should step aside and allow others to give it a shot. And we have a lot of that. We have a lot of that who are playing for their retirement. And this happens in other industries as well. I consult a lot with Fortune 1000 companies, and I've had under NDAs, so I can't speak of names of people or the companies, but I've had multiple CEOs tell me and my colleagues that we were right in what they're saying, but they have 2 years left until their golden parachute, until they ride off into the sunset, and they know that this was going to be a problem, but it'll be somebody else's problem because they'll be retired on a private island off the coast of Florida in 2 years. I think we have a leadership failure across so many organizations that needs to be addressed.
Milos, I agree with everything that you have said. And I have the joy of sitting on cabinet reporting to the president. And I have tried, although I've only been there 3 years, I've tried to have hard conversations like what you are saying. And one of the challenges I have is facing well, you're the IT person, what do you know about this? And then let's add the woman part on top of that, which makes it even more interesting. And then let's add the you've only been here 3 years, what do you know part on top of that, right? So when we're trying to talk about, or I'm trying to talk about, what is our value proposition as a university, and what is it that we do, and how do we make that better and more attractive, as you've stated, I don't make any headway. And so I'm curious if anybody here has that position at the table who has had the opportunity to make those statements, ask those hard questions in a way that's been productive and actually has moved anything forward. Because I would love to benefit from your wisdom other than telling me to be a man, because that's not going to really work at this point.
It's funny, that's exactly what I was thinking about when you were saying that. I'm actually very lucky right now, and that was in a very positive way. I'm very lucky right now is we have a new president who got here just prior to COVID, but and clearly his eyes roll in the back of his head every time I talk about IT, but he recognizes the value. So in my mind, that's a big thing in the plus column is, and our CFO is in the same boat. The thing that scares me most is they don't ask any tough questions. They're just trusting me. And I think back to Milos's point, part of the problem that has occurred, I've worked in the federal government, I've worked in large corporate, and I've worked in 2 colleges. Part of IT for a long time has been a jobs program. And I'm talking to the IT folks, but it's true. My wife works at a state university, and it just boggles my mind, what resources in terms of personnel they have. Nuno, I said I was talking to Bob a couple weeks ago, and Bob Allard, who's the president of Extension Engine. If you don't know Bob, everybody should try to link into Bob because he's a great guy. And he said something was really interesting, which is, most higher ed institutions haven't ever really had a bad quarter, right? Or a bad year, right? For a long time, we've been on this cusp of, it's not like, auto sales dropped 28% in one quarter and your world has changed. And so I think part of what we have to get to, and I think I've said this to some people on this call before. On my whiteboard right there, I have a list of 15 colleges that have closed in the last 3 years. And see, it's right there in red. And my staff comes into my office like, why are those there? It's like, that's to remind us that if we don't get better at what we do, we're not going to be here. One of our strategies right now on campus is, and my enterprise systems and network staff, I think their head explode every time I say this. My goal is to get rid of the data center, right? It's the most expensive room on campus. There's no when I got here 2 years ago, we were still running Exchange on-prem. We were still running our learning management system on-prem and everything like that. And now we've migrated everything, but I'm spending $200,000 a year for a room, right, that I'd really just like to get rid of, in terms of power and fire suppression and security and hardware maintenance and software maintenance and VMware licenses and stuff like that. So I don't have an answer other than the value proposition is a hard discussion to have with people who don't understand it. One of the things that we do, and it's a pretty simple way to do it, but like we've broken down all of our, what's the cost of email? It's $1.70 per user per month. And when you break it down at that level, and that's, we use Exchange Online, we have an Adobe enterprise agreement, enterprise license for college-owned computers now, and that's $5 a month. That's the most expensive thing on the stack. We use Great Horn for email, sort of our email protection, which if you haven't looked at Great Horn's product, it's a very good product. It's $2 per user per month kind of thing. When you break things down to that level, it's combined, it's cheaper than 2 lattes at the Starbucks across campus. So the hard part that we're dealing with right now, and the one question I was going to sort of throw out there is, we're on a Genzabar CX platform, which anybody who uses Genzabar, I think it's an awful product, and they haven't invested in it in 20 years. And so what are you going to do? What are you going to do when Genzabar goes out of business in a couple of years, because they basically are down to, as far as I can tell, less than 50 or 60 institutions that are using their product, and they're not having any more sales. So at some point, they're either going to be bought or spun off or consumed by somebody else, and you got to go somewhere. And I'm just interested, I would be very interested to hear where everybody's going to go.
So Steve, hi, I'm Lonnie Abbas. I'm from Wartburg College. We're in Iowa. And a couple points. First, back to Milo's talking about the strategic. I've been lucky enough, I've been here only 15 months. So I was here 4 months before the pandemic. We were doing all this great strategic discussion. That discussion you wanted to happen, my leadership is actually doing it, talking about transforming, fixing this problem in higher ed. How are we going to move forward? Some of it's technology and some of it is a lot of other strategies. And of course, the pandemic hit, that kind of got put on hold, but we really kicked that back up again, I would say, by October. And I have been focusing on those strategic things since then again, because we can't just be in response mode all the time. We're not going to get anywhere. And Steve, back to your point, one of the other things since I've been here is to that data center kind of moving to the cloud. We just got a contract signed with Genzabar to move to their Genzabar One SaaS option that we're moving this term. And the way that I had to sell that and the way I had to work with that is this, the value proposition. My VP, my CFO actually said, hey, I want to net zero this. If we're going to move to the cloud, I don't want any more increase for the year. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if they'll do that, but we'll work with them. And I was able to get Genzabar so that I have net zero difference in moving off premise the first year already. And then of course, down the line, we'll save a lot more money and time and labor and all that. So right now I would say is a great time to work with moving things into the cloud, because vendors want you. And if you can sell them on the fact that I honestly have no money. I've got less money than I had last year. What can you do for me? Some of these places are just, Genzabar's trying to keep their customers, to your point. We migrated off of CX onto Genzabar One, I think a couple of years ago. So we're using their Genzabar One product. I don't know a lot about it. Obviously, I've only been here 15 months, but our eggs are all in that basket, and that's where we're hanging. Hopefully, if they get bought out by somebody, being that we're a SaaS customer, we'll be in the platform that gets kept. But it is what it is. It's migrating off an ERP is not a fun proposition. So it's a huge project.
Jason,
But
I
I'm
see
just
you
very
want to.
grateful. I don't get to sit on the cabinet like you do, Sherry. I wish I did. They literally meet on the other side of this wall. And there are times when they're meeting and I'm getting text messages from the VPs asking me questions and I'm responding. And I'm like, why don't you just have me come around the corner? You're wasting time.
That's
Wasting
exactly my point.
so much time. And I keep
That's exactly
asking,
yeah.
why am I not sitting at this table? Why am I not at this table all the time? And it's, well, your predecessor never was. Well, I don't really care. Why am I not at this table? It's a different time. Every discussion you're having in there has technical implications. Every single one. Any strategy, anything you're looking at. And they probably spend, half hour at a time talking about something that is not anywhere near possible to do. When you get a message that says, is it possible for us to completely outsource all of the network? And you're like, oh my Lord, do I really have to answer this over a text?
You should just
Right,
say,
so
you should just say maybe and just period, and just leave it at that.
Actually, I would suggest you get up and go around the corner and say, look, this is going to be simpler.
Well,
if
the
I
problem now is I
have that
used to be able to go
conversation.
around the corner, but actually since last March, they're meeting via Zoom. So unless I do have the Zoom admin, I could jump into their meeting without them knowing it, but I think I might get written up for that one.
Jason, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a different boat. I am a consultant, but work with a lot of CIOs, presidents, and first off, Stephen, your question occurred to me that I might be able to help out from a broader industry perspective in terms of what you see selling and what you don't, in terms of SISs. You have Elucian's products. They're still pretty strong, although Banner's not really selling all that much, but Colleague in the cloud is. Obviously, Workday's new to the market, but they've had their struggles in getting customers live on Student. I haven't heard of a single successful go live without there being some kind of problem. I think Indian River had huge financial aid problems, for example. You have Anthology, which used to be campus management. I wouldn't say they're big in the big public market, but they've been doing well in kind of the mid-size community college, smaller privates. The other interesting one too, and why I wanted to mention this, is Oracle Student Cloud. So for a long time, Oracle was viewed, like if you looked at Oracle's PeopleSoft solution, it was for big institutions. No small or mid-sized institutions could afford it. And unless you were of a huge size, you didn't really consider it. But there's actually getting a lot of attention from small schools on their Oracle Student Cloud solution. So I think it was Juilliard just went live on Oracle Student Cloud. There are a few thousand people. And so Oracle is taking a different tack with that Student Cloud product. Now, it's still a lot of vaporware and just like Workday is, but that's kind of, and then you have smaller players, Unit4 and a few others, but that's kind of where the market's going. And just in terms of what we're talking about and hearing some of the stories, I mean, what we always go into with every institution is, if you're actually going to come up with a valid digital strategy and focus on transformation, which has to start with people and processes. Technology supports your transformation. It's not a driver of your transformation. The CIO can't report the CFO anymore. IT has to be Milos, I tell everybody that if you want IT to drive your business strategy, then the CIO shouldn't. When the CIO is under a CFO, IT's looked at as a just an expenditure. They're just a budget suck of money, and I think COVID's shown that IT can drive business strategy. That's been one of the things that's come out of COVID. But even without COVID, that's kind of a must-have. And kind of the way I view things is, if you're going to continue nesting IT under a financial officer, you're going to struggle transforming your institution. And like Stephen mentioned, there's some have-nots, and there's going to be more of them. And I think I saw it in the chat. But I always say you can't cut to be successful anymore. Somebody's going to do it better. Somebody's going to have a better student experience, and IT is going to be a big driver of that. So thanks for letting me chime in.
Elmore, you had something you
Yeah, two things sort of jump out to me that I'm hearing here. Obviously that strategic perspective, that what is the value add, what is the strategic orientation of the institution, and IT fitting within that is a critical discussion to push forward. But in terms of Milos's question of how do you get that conversation pushed forward, it seems to me that one of the things that might be helpful, that I was just wondering about, could we play off of this group and do something there, is to benchmark it and to benchmark, what the structures are and what the actions are that folks see as being effective. I mean, Steve's example was a great one in that piece of software. I suspect there are other things like that out there, and that then puts arrows in your quiver to have a conversation with the administration, Laurie, and say, nobody else has the CIO reporting to enrollment management. And so I think that combination of being a driver for focusing on a strategic understanding, and then secondly, having some benchmarking data to say, look at things that are working at other places, or looking at how out of step we are with things that are going on, might be able to push that conversation forward.
How many on right now report to their CFO on this call? How many actually report to the president? I'm interested to know who reports directly to the president. Is that 2, 3? Okay.
I see 3 hands.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. 4. The problem, interesting thing is, so when I have my yearly budgeting meeting, I'm sitting there with the president, and I'm sitting there also with the business manager. So of course, every other line item, it's kind of like, well, what's this thing? What's this thing? And so it's nevertheless talking to the president, because the president, for the most part, assumes that I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying if it was not a necessity. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there could be some presidents to question that, but with me being there that long, having everything maintained, pretty much kept the budgetary line pretty flat for the last few years. But the business manager, he's only been there about a year or so, is always asking, well, is this a necessity? Do we need this? Can we go somewhere else, et cetera? I think that's the biggest issue. And I don't mind having those conversations, but that's a conversation I think that if you are having, it should be outside the realm of you and your president, because it undermines the conversation that you're trying to get that conversation that you're budgeting with the president should be pretty much 15, 20 minutes tops for the most part, because you've already had your strategic meeting. You already had your 5-year plan and all that. So you both should be on the same page as what the needs are for the school. When you have a finance officer that's questioning everything, that should be an offline meeting where you try to work up a trust between you and them to ensure that they understand what your job is and why it is that you're saying these needs are there. At that point, if he still doesn't get it, then you have to maybe change the tone of the conversation to more mundane words or something to that effect, or pull, what Elmore's saying, well, based on, here's another example. This is how this school does it. And they're able to do it because they do exactly what we do. They use A, B, and C. We use C, D, and E, but this is how it works. Maybe putting apples to apples in that respect gets the conversation so that the CFO, finance manager, is now on your team and now working with you. The only thing I would add is that at the same time, I think the CTO, CIO should also be part of a revenue committee, which we've been trying to do at our college, so that when there is, 10, 15, 20% drop in revenue because you don't have students staying on campus, you are looking at other avenues to generate revenue. And the IT guy is always should be part of that because they know the infrastructure. Your facilities director should be part of that conversation. You should be part of that conversation, as well as the finance person, because you know what the cost is and how you can generate additional revenue to pay back for the technology that's utilized. That's my spin.
Could I go back to Elmore's question for a second? Elmore asked, would benchmarking be useful? Now, as I'm watching the chat here, the range of sizes and complexities of institutions we have here are from probably under 1,000 to close to 50,000 students. You're obviously not the same. The 50,000 student institution hopefully does not have just 2 people in IT. But would having that benchmarking data be useful to you?
I mean, we have it.
I mean, NERCOMP does that, and I'm sure and EDUCAUSE does that.
EDUCAUSE, yeah, we have it. I mean, a lot of good ideas, a lot of good comments. One of the things I would like to say, just to one of the earlier questions that Lonnie and Sherry made. I do my best to position myself as a business executive who happens to be in charge of technology. I'm not the IT guy, okay? And there's a difference of how you position yourself, what you tolerate, what you are willing, whose swim lanes you're staying out of, and you're also making sure that some people are not overflowing and coming into your swim lane and drowning you. I have worked and reported for CFO in my career. I've reported for provost. I've reported for multiple presidents. President is the only right place to be. I have done a lot of research. My PhD dissertation was actually on the role of CIOs in driving innovation in higher ed. Like, this is one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about when it comes to my professional world. And CFO, they're different animals by the very nature of their position. CFO is command and control, manage the expenses, reduce stuff, be predictable, don't rock the boat. That's their job. Good quality CIO is the exact opposite. Rock the boat, break some stuff, try new things, innovate, think ahead, expand. And if you have one under the other, it just doesn't work. So going back to some of the conversations and some of the comments made earlier, it is really, really important for things that worked for me is I don't ever talk to, I mean, I'm sure you're the same thing. You're all senior. You've done this for a while. I don't ever use any tech skills, jargon, tools, anything within my senior leadership team, like my president's senior leadership team. I never talk about that. I talk about what are the strategic priorities of the university? How do we solve those problems? I just gave an idea the other day to our marketing team, which is now going to be a major marketing campaign for Grand Valley State University. Not my role, right? But we were talking about how do we do this as we were starting a new semester, a new year. I said, hey, we thought about X, Y, and Z. Oh, everybody loved it. That's what we're doing. You start producing examples and value that go beyond your functional role, and you figure out what keeps your boss up at night and solve that. you're going to win either way. If you figure out what keeps if I report to the president, if I figure out what keeps her up at night and I solve that, I am moving up along with my team to the inner circle and have more influence to the overall strategy and direction. If I still solve it and that doesn't change, I now know where I stand, and it's time for me to go and go elsewhere. Right? Either way, you win. You know where you stand, or you're increasing and improving your influence.
Thanks, Milos. So we're coming towards the end of the hour, and let me ask Nuno if he would care to share a few words with us.
Hey everybody, good to see a lot of you back on. As Tom mentioned, this is the 8th virtual meetup, I believe, that we've put together. This format seems to be working well. I want to react to a couple of things I've heard so far, and then maybe bring this to a close. Love to hear the passion from Milos, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think a fundamental issue right now, and not just now, for a long time, is higher ed doesn't look at itself as a business. And then the conversations that we have with people at all levels, it's those that come across as entrepreneurial and innovative, and who realize that higher ed really is a business, that are looking at the market, that are looking at their strengths and differentiations and leveraging those, meeting the needs of the world that they're trying to serve, and then looking at technology as a way to support those approaches. Those are the people that are going to be successful. I mean, in addition to what's going on right now, there are a whole bunch of disruptive technologies that are out there that are starting to impact higher ed, and will continue to do so even more. Blockchain, virtual reality, AI, Internet of Things. There are a bunch of innovative educational concepts that are continuously affect higher ed. Government policy, societal trends, all of that. And it's those people that are looking at across all those areas, including technology. And like Milos said, solving those big problems at the president level, who I think are going to differentiate themselves. I don't have much more time, but I did want to share with you some encouraging statistics in terms of truly transforming higher ed. There was a survey done by Inside Higher Ed recently as to how is leadership planning to react to COVID. 50%, and I'm looking at this graphic right now, 50% said, okay, we're going to step back and we're going to transform. 35% said, we're going to reset for growth, which basically means we're going to do a few things a little bit better, but essentially we're going to go back to what we were doing. 11% basically came out and said, no, we're not doing anything new. We're just going to return to normal. And 3% said we're going to get smaller. So the good news is that 50% at least are saying, hey, we're going to do something. We're going to try to transform. But anyway, just some thoughts. Please use this forum to help one another. Hopefully this develops some sort of peer collaborations. If we can assist in any way, you know, we're here to make introductions. We look to you to provide topics for the next meetup, which I think will be in February. We're thinking of a couple of different things, and for ways that this could be more helpful to you. Does anyone have any comments to the group or any feedback on anything whatsoever in the last couple of minutes?
You know, I would appreciate the link to that article if you could share that.
Sure.
Yeah, you know what? It was actually, I took it as a screenshot during the presentation. But let me see if I can find the actual article. I do have the text from the entire presentation. It's just I could copy paste it into something and send it to you if that helps.
Yeah, I'd probably be able to track it down then, so that'd be helpful.
I'm sure we'll be able to figure it out. We'll also send it out along with the survey afterwards.
Great, that sounds good. And you know what? We had another recent meetup where we talked about cost savings in general, and we compiled a list of things that other universities are doing for cost savings. I wonder if it would be useful to take the suggestions during this conversation and what we've heard in other forums, and just send out a list to everybody. Here's what we've heard. Would that help? Yeah.
We can certainly share that.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. I'm just going to pass it back to you, Michael.
Well, thank you. We're at just about 1 o'clock, but if anybody has a final comment. If not, I'm going to thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next month. An announcement will probably come out when
Early next week. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Everybody have a good day. Have a good weekend, and see you next month.